Okay, so welcome back to the EEG lab. So we're going to record EEG here, and we're going to take that EEG that we record, and upstairs in the computer lab, we're going to turn that into ERPs, right? The event-related potentials. So when we come down here, there's a handful of things that we'll do, and it kind of works through several different stages and processes, and we're going to go through that particularly slowly today. So you guys are probably already growing tired of me asking for your patience. I'm going to continue to ask for it, okay? Because it's important that we go slow to get this right. And if we set the right foundation first, then we can spend the rest of the semester doing all the kind of fun things that we can do, and we will do those things right, rather than spend the whole rest of our time trying to learn to do it right. It's a lot easier to just do it right the first time, learn it right, and then we'll all be on the same page. We'll all know the same sort of policies and protocols and ways that we do things, so that we can make sure that the equipment stays in good shape and that the data is collected in good shape so that you guys can have a good time doing it right. Sound like a good plan? Okie doke. So, generally what will happen is you'll come down to lab a little bit earlier before the research participant plans to arrive. So it's kind of like a regular doctor's office in that you're going to have essentially, we don't call them a patient unless they have some type of a neurological impairment, which right now they don't here. So we just call it a research participant. And you want to get here a little bit earlier before they do, and we're going to set the lab up. So what that means is kind of get your equipment ready, and we also have some important paperwork and consent forms to prepare. And so we're going to get those ready too. So just like anything else in life, any kind of job that you'd be at, right? You set yourself up for success, get there early. You know, when I used to bar back and bartend, we would go through some crazy, long, busy nights on the Jersey Shore with thousands of people at this $1 million nightclub on the beach. And the way that we kind of made sure we made a lot of money doing that was we set ourselves up for success, set the bar up early in the morning, get everything prepped, backups to backups to backups, and then as things get busy, you never get behind. Because there's always a way to stay in front of things. And so it's a pretty good practice that we try to follow down here. So we get our paperwork ready. We keep our paperwork in here. For now, we won't pull it out at this moment. But basically, no, it's a consent form. It's about probably 3 to 4 pages. And it's really important that we walk through it very carefully. Hopefully you guys have all been participants before or researchers in other labs. And it is important that we maintain that important part of research protocols for getting that informed consent for a couple different reasons. One, ethically, right? So it's important to make sure we maintain those research ethics and that nobody is being coerced or compelled to participate in anything that they don't want to participate in. They should know, and we should be very clear in explaining that of course this is entirely voluntary and they're free to stop at any time. But there's a correlate to that, which is that it's also completely voluntary for us. Which means that if they decide not to comply, that we can stop the experiment at any time, which saves you a 2-hour data session of your time for somebody who just blindly pressed keys to get free Sona credit or what have you, because they don't have respect and regard for your time. So this respect is a two-way street. And so it's important we start that consent form off in the right tone and really build a good working relationship with the subject, because we're going to be together for a couple hours, okay? And you want them motivated and happy and excited in the best ways that's possible, because this stuff can otherwise be kind of boring. But you want them interested to make sure they're on the same team with you and that they want to give you good data so that you can do cool science. So that starts with building a good rapport with the person. Talking with them, making them feel comfortable, making them feel welcome, and walking through that consent form in a way that doesn't give them the tone, oh, this is just some paperwork here, fill it out, okay, thanks, okay, yeah, I'll sign it. Right? Walk through it so they understand what are we going to do and why are we going to do it. Because we're going to do some wacky kind of stuff, actually, sort of. And if they're just think that they're a guinea pig, then they're going to get bored, they're not going to care, and they might make some mistakes that could hurt your data. So you do want to practice these really good psychology research skills of working with people, treating them with respect, and building that rapport so that they understand why are we doing this. And then it'll be like, okay, cool. Make sense? Okay, so what we will explain is basically each element of the study. And to explain the elements of the study, you guys actually want to pass that back, it requires explaining the equipment that we're going to use. So, Stormy, right?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Thank you for volunteering.
Thank you.
What we're going to do is we're going to be conducting some pretty interesting studies about how people make various different kinds of basic decisions, some basic judgments, and we'll get to record some really cool physiology of brainwaves when we do it. So one of the things that's important to note is that when we record these brainwave patterns, we're going to be using electrodes on the scalp, but it's not invasive. So it's actually really simple, really safe. It's, these electrodes rest actually above the skin and not actually penetrating the skin or being any kind of injection. So that's an important clarification to make, because why would people know that, right? They're like, oh, they do some crazy brainwave experiments down here, or they've never seen this before. They've seen a movie that completely tells a different story, right? We want them to know that this is safe, it's non-invasive, there's no reason to be anxious or apprehensive, and put them at ease, right? That helps them to, guess what? Not give us,
false data.
well, not false data, but
Inaccurate.
I was going to say the conflated data with other types of artifacts. If you're anxious, you're going to have some extra skin tension that the electrodes are going to pick up. That we remember we talked about, Bree, today in our data? So this is part of that first part of that answer that we gave, which is making sure we set up to get the data clean. Part of that means putting them at ease. They're not anxious and, oh my god, okay. Right? So everything's going to be really easy. So your job is basically to sit there and hang out, have good communication with us, let us know if something bothers you, and that way we know to kind of stop and change course. So what's going to happen is we are going to record some brainwave data, and we're going to put this cap on your head.
Okay.
So the cap, we explain, is just essentially a shower cap. So it's inert, there's no electrodes in it. It's just an elastic piece that's meant to hold the different electrodes in spots on your head in the same places for the same people. So these are just little plastic nodules, and you can let them look at it and say it's just empty stuff, and then you can kind of see through it, hey guys. And they'll have a little chin strap, and you put your ears in the side and make it comfortable. And these will hold our electrodes in place. And then we want to show them our actual electrode rig, which we keep here. And there's a reason that we keep it up here in this way, okay? And so generally, the first thing to note is this end is a really important end of a fitting, okay? So this is what connects to our computer, and it's a very sensitive, very expensive piece of equipment, okay? And it's really important that it doesn't get wet. Now, that might not matter right now because there's no water around here, but when we clean it later, it will be exposed to water, and we never want to get this side wet. Likewise, this splitter box, as it's called, because it splits the wires out, should also always be protected from water. And we'll explain that later, the procedures we use to make sure that that happens, okay? But what we want to do is show them the electrodes, okay? So, we can kind of show Stormy here our electrodes, and we want her to be able to see, not just trust our word for it, right? And say, oh yeah, well, they're not sharp, right? She's going, yeah, right, come on, prove it, right? Right? So you have like a doubting Thomas over here, show me it, right? Okay, so, yeah, right, you're not going to stick these things in my head, right? So here's what we do, we just show them. These are our little electrodes. See that little metal piece? That's all it is, just flat. You want to touch it? It's not sharp, right? And so it'll rest essentially right above your skin, kind of like that. And these little holes just get held in place in these little nodules. And it's really that easy. So, what we'll do is we'll first set this cap up on your head, and then ultimately we're going to plug these different electrodes into these spots. Now the thing about it is that in between plugging those electrodes into these spots, we got to do a couple other steps. Now you guys might remember this, we talked about it on Monday, right? What were some of those steps? Gel, right? Now who remembers why we're going to use gel?
The dead skin.
Because what?
The dead skin.
The dead skin we're going to exfoliate, right? And the gel certainly helps to do that. Was there a broader reason? So the current's on the right road. What about the current?
Conductivity.
Ah, yeah. So we're concerned about the conductivity, the jump of the signal from the brain, right, which is inside the skull. How are we going to get from inside, I would say stormy skull, but it's easier to hold this head, right? I'm not going to hold your head, right? And I can't do this to it. So, something's in here, right? Hopefully the brain. And our job as scientists, right, is we're trying to figure out stuff about it. And that's incredibly difficult. And for thousands of years, Plato, Aristotle, the Greeks, everybody's been trying to figure this out almost impossibly. And we're in such a great, wonderful era of science now that we have the tools to take some snapshots into this. But our brain signals, right, they've got to jump from the brain through the skull, before that through the meninges, right, then the scalp, then through the hair. And we talked about how these electrodes themselves, they don't even penetrate the skin, they don't barely even rest on the skin. So that's a big journey that our electrical signals need to make. And there are barriers to the conductivity of that electrical signal. We call those barriers essentially impedance. Yes?
I was just wondering, for the numbering of the scalp, is there like a certain way that those...
Oh yeah, there is a systematic way that the numbers of our electrodes are organized across the scalp. It's called the International 1020 system. And the way that it works is we start with the midline. Right? And our midline is essentially our 0 number. Now, how do you have a number 0 go all the way across the midline? Because there's different spots. So we label our electrodes. Some are frontal, some are central, some are parietal, and some are all the way back here, occipital. Now, you guys remember those lobes of the brain? Mm-hmm. So it makes a lot of sense that we label them that right? Now, because we have lots of electrodes, we tend to have lots of names, or at least labels for their locations. So sometimes it's not just frontal or central. Sometimes it might be frontocentral. So it's not F or C, but it would be FC. Now, you would have a 0 number along our midline. So that would be F, Z, or Z, or so Z, CZ, central Z, PZ for parietal Z, and OZ for occipital Z. Now here's where the other numbers come in. So that's just 0. You guys know odds and evens, right? Okay, so anywhere to the right hemisphere, away from the midline, as you move more laterally, those numbers are going to be even numbers. 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate?
Dr. Addante.
Nice. I appreciate you guys too. The even side, of course, or the odd side on the is going to be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So let's stick with the central site, right? CZ. One spot over is C2. Another spot over laterally as you move further is C4, C6. FZ, F2, F4, F8, or 6 and 8. Likewise, PZ, P3, or P1, P3, P5, P7. And you see those combinations. We'll get to that later in class. It's a lot easier when we can show it on Blackboard and I can draw. And maybe later we'll get some more styrofoam heads you can draw on them and diagram it out. But the idea is we need that gel, right? We're going to return back to this idea of impedance. Impedance is the blockage of the electrical signal, right? The relative blockage, right? Because you're going to get some signal, but it's just a measure in actually kiloohms of how good that signal is that we're recording at the scalp with the electrode, which is basically being impeded or stopped by those dead skin cells, by all the other stuff that needs to be cleared out of the way. So what we're going to do, and this is a long explanation for you guys, it wouldn't be this long for our research participant, right? Because we're kind of killing multiple birds with one stone here in terms of explaining it to her, explaining it to you guys. And so we have to explain to her basically that the brain signals have a heck of a journey to make from inside your brain to the outside of it, and then to get picked up on the top of this plastic thing after it goes through this gap. One of the ways that we do that is we use some salt. gel, so a saline solution, and we only use the salt gel because the salt ions help to conduct that electricity, as you guys remember. It allows it to jump a little bit closer to the electrode, makes this a better signal. Okay? So we're going to fill a little bit of gel in there. You tell them it might be a little cold, a little gooey, and this is a good time. So remember I said you would have your equipment prepared already? So you come down earlier, you set yourself up for success. You take your little syringes, right? And you could, this is our gel. Okay, so you open this up. All right, that's our gel. Oop, sorry. I was trying to show you guys. How'd that fall off? The spinner? Okay, so you guys see our gel? Yeah? You want to see the gel? You're good? Okay, so it's kind of goopy gel, and it's kind of fun. You can kind of like tell her, hey, you can like feel the gel if you want to. Right, so it'll be like that. It's a little cold, a little goopy, a little slimy, and this is a good reason why, right? Because it gets on your hands a little bit, and then it'll dry. It'll be kind of white and flaky. So if it gets on your clothes, I was wearing a black jacket earlier, you'll get white flaky gel on. So that's why we have these lab coats. If you need to use a nice little napkin or clear it off so it doesn't damage your clothes or anything like that. And by the way, it's not going to damage it. It'll just.
Can I borrow the lab coat real quick?
I'm sorry.
Can I borrow the lab coat real quick?
Yes, you can. So along those lines, right? We kid because you can do that, but we actually have some. Excuse me. You can give them some rags and napkins and things like that. So she can hold that if you want. But what we would do, can you hold that for me? So you can come in here and actually, wow, this is really in there. Okay, so because there's not a lot of gel left in this container, we got to get in there pretty good, so you get a big goop of gel, right? Which is another reason why we have these lab coats, because that big goop of gel on here can get kind of messy. So you can borrow that for a second, just in case it doesn't get on your clothes. And who wants to be some of our first research assistants? Anybody want to help? A little help? Okay, you got one? Okay. I'm sorry? Okay, so Summer. Would you be so kind as to look in the second drawer up from the floor, and you can throw out a couple extra lab coats for some of our helpers, and we clean this off. And there's different sizes, so just see what works.
Just totally messed up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's probably a little petite for you. A little bit.
You can try it.
That's a ladies one too. It has the needle back here. See?
Do you not get a lot of mail?
That's a good one. Yeah. Now where did I put this? Oh, yeah. So the idea. All right. Remember your name?
Jose.
Okay, Jose. I feel like we're doing like a street magic show or something. I'm like getting participants off the, so come on down, Jose. Price is right. Right? Yeah. So where are you from now? Okay, so Jose and I would have come down here and prepared this session, right, ahead of time, so we're not wasting time with a participant whose time is also very valuable. So we would have filled these things up with gel already, or syringes. They would have already seen that. And what you do is you also fill up and cap it off with a little syringe tip. Now, this is a really important part of explaining the consent form to the subject. First of all, you're not doing this while you're consenting them, right? Really important part, right? Because we're doing several goals now, right? We're talking about this as we're training researchers. We're not actually running the session. So, we would be explaining these things to her. You scared?
No.
Okay, you're scared.
No, I do that a lot.
Okay, cool. Well, just let me know. So, we would have this stuff prepared, and so this can be scary to people, right? This is a syringe. I'm talking about their scalp, their head, right? I mean, that's why I asked you. Was I freaking you out?
No.
Okay, so.
I've seen scientists before.
Okay, so in the consent process, right, we're telling them ahead of time, this is what we're going to do, and we're showing the equipment, and we're saying, we need, and we're saying why, right? We explain that brain signals has to jump from the brain, through the skull, to the electrode, and it reaches impedance along the journey, and we want to overcome that impedance by getting through some of that dead skin, and so we only use this little syringe because we've got a tough job. We've got to get gel into these tiny little capsules. So the way that we do that is just through a syringe, and it just fits in there, nice and easy. Now, it's really important to put them at ease and let them know that this syringe is not sharp. It's a blunt tip, right? And so you explain, so this is a blunt tip, don't worry, it's not going to hurt you, we're not stabbing you. And you ask them if they want the opportunity, they can feel it and touch it. You want to touch it at the end, right? So you can feel that even if it actually touches you, it's not going to puncture you or anything like that. And then it's really important to take this next step, which is to actually show them what they can experience of what's going to happen on the scalp. Okay? So what's going to happen on the scalp is we don't just need to get the gel there, but we need to actually get through this little top layer of dead skin cells that are on everybody's skin, everywhere, all over. So basically you can think of it as exfoliating the skin. So can I borrow your hand for a moment? What's going to happen is it'll just kind of feel like this. We're going to put a little bit of this goopy gel there. Okay, so you want them to feel that, right? And know that it's going to be a little slimy because it'll be a little cold on their head. And then you also want to show them what we're going to do to exfoliate the skin, which is to basically take the tip of that syringe and we move it around really gently. Is it tickling? Yeah. That's actually pretty good. You want them to know that it should tickle, not hurt. Now here's the thing. It can hurt. But the only reason it hurts is if we do it wrong, if we do it too much, which is why it's really helpful to take some time amongst yourselves and kind of practice and see what's going to be too, that'll hurt, right?
Not really.
Okay, so you want to do it nice and light so that you're moving the gel around and it just kind of scratches, just a scratch, and they'll know what to expect because that's going to be on all these different spots on your head. We want to explain to them in the consent process that some of the risks of the experiment involve a little bit of discomfort from this process, but importantly clarify that that discomfort should not actually become pain. And this is where it comes back to having a really good experience of building rapport with that person, communication-wise, because we have to remind them that if it should ever become beyond discomfort or painful, please feel really comfortable communicating with me and just letting me know, hey, that hurts a little bit, and then I know I'll stop and I'll move to a different side on your head. And so it might leave a few little indentations from just being scratched, but it should never leave a mark that's a scab or bleeding or anything like that. But that's on us, but also on the teamwork that we need to build with them to make sure that they feel comfortable communicating with us. Right? Because they might be intimidated, they might be scared, and you're wearing white lab coats and stuff like that, and so they might not want to tell you, ouch, ouch, that hurts. So you really want, to do that part well. Now here's a benefit of doing that beyond that. The more they build trust and a relationship with you, the more likely they are to give you better data because they're not going to just zone out and become a zombie and just say, oh my God, can I get this over? You just press the buttons to end the experiment. Okay? And it happens. It happens. So, we'll explain that. We'll hold that. Thank you, Jose. And the other thing that we'll then explain is that what we also do is we record the brain activity, but what ends up happening is because this is electrical activity, that's used to basically signal between neurons, but also between neurons that communicate with anytime you have a muscle tension. So anytime a muscle squeezes, it's going to send a huge jolt of electricity that's going to interfere with our brain signals that we're trying to record. Now, one of those big muscle squeezes that happens all the time is when we blink. So every time we blink, boom, it sends a huge jolt of electricity across our scalp that's recorded in all of our other brain sites. Now, that gets in the way. We talked about artifacts today, right? So, we're not going to ask you to never blink for the next 2 hours, okay? We tried that once. People weren't, just kidding. So, but what we're going to ask is to just blink regularly. Now, the way that we account for that scientifically is we have ways that we can do algorithms that subtract those blinks from the brain activity. But in order to subtract that information from the brain activity, we need to know what to subtract. Well, we need to know what the blinks are. So what we do is we also record the actual eye activity from electrodes that we put, as we saw in this gentleman, above and below the eye, and also to the left and to the right. So this is just, again, it's a non-invasive measure, and we show them that it's just one of these. Let's see here. We keep these electrodes over here, and these are ocular electrodes. Okay, so you don't really want these bottoms of the electrodes to touch the ground, and they generally won't unless you don't pay attention. One way that I like to help do that is I'll kind of hang them around my neck like this. And it's just not entirely foolproof, but it's a good sort of stopgap. And so you can show them that these are just flat electrodes. You know, you can feel that and touch it. It's not going to hurt your eyes or anything. We'll put a little baby dab of gel in there before, and then what we end up doing is we use a little sticker to attach it to your face. These little stickers look like this. They're double-sided, so you stick one side to the face, and the other side just naturally sticks to the electrode. It's pretty nifty. Okay. Now, some of you lovely ladies have worn makeup today. Makeup gets in the way of stickiness. So what we do...
I don't.
I'm sorry?
I don't wear it.
Okie doke. So what we would do if you were to be wearing makeup is... So I used to actually use these sanitizing electrode swabs, because that's how I was trained. But the wonderful ladies who are in our lab now brought me to see the light. And made me realize that these things exist in the world, something called cleansing facial wipes for makeup. Right? Gentlemen, did you know that these existed? I didn't.
For what? Why would?
Yeah. So I never knew that. So we have these wonderful new pieces of equipment, and we would, that's just essentially the same thing. It's a wipe that you clean off the site of where you're going to attach those electrodes, and you explain that to them. So this is all in the context of explaining informed consent, because they need to know. They need to know, why are you doing this thing by my eyeball, right? Especially, and sometimes if it's a guy or a lady who doesn't have makeup, right? I'm not going to use this. What I'm going to use is specifically that alcohol swab. Where did I put that? Is it here? Okay. So I'm going to take this alcohol swab, right? And I'm just going to make sure that I let her know what I'm going to do and why. That we're going to take a little bit of an electrode swab. Are you sure you're okay?
Yeah.
Okay. You seem scared.
No.
Okay. And I'm not going to do this now.
Okay.
But we are going to do that here and here. Now here's a backstory of why it's important to tell them about this. Okay? So when I was learning how to do this in college, and you can see my old college tape on the video links I was showing you doing this, I was saying the same talk like 15 years ago. And it was right after our wrestling practice, and one of my buddies was a national champion. His name is Nick Vincigari. He's an awesome guy, right? He needs some extra credit in class. And so he's volunteered to be a research participant for us. Now, one of the other researchers, he's actually now a professor at that school, he was getting them all worked up, and we're used to doing this 4 times a day, all day, every day, we're doing this. And so the researcher he wasn't an athlete, he was just not into sports, and so he wasn't used to thinking about these other elements. Now, Nick was fresh. Him and I had just come from practice. It was wrestling practice. We were really getting after it against each other pretty hard, and he's a 200-pound national champion. He was good. He's kind of an animal. And he's super happy to get some extra credit and participate and help us out. So he's sitting here, just like Stormy is, just kind of like hanging out, and the other researcher just goes about his business and says, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this. And he starts going and cleaning off on the thing, and doesn't realize that because Nick had just come out of practice, he had all these scrapes on his face. And he puts this alcohol right in the open wounds, right? And you got a 200-pound, very angry national champion right now who was doing his best to be polite and get his extra credit that he really needed for class. And he's like, and he's like, what are you doing to my face? Right? And, you know, it all worked out and all this kind of thing. But it's a good story to let you know that, right, sometimes we don't always remember to be conscientious about taking the other person's point of view and thinking about these factors for what's going to be involved in these experiments. So, communicate. That's why I'm spending a lot of time saying a lot of words to you guys right now. Communication is really good. It is really helpful. So we want to communicate. Tell her this, and we'll be attaching those things at each of those sites. And we'll also do those on our Mastoid sites, which is there and there. Okay, and so you show her this. You show her the syringe tips. You show her the syringe. You show her the gel. You show her the electrodes. You show her the electrode cap. All that good jazz. You explain that. Another risk of the experiment is that you might get a little bored. It's kind of long. Fatigue is one of the risks, which basically translates, there's not a lot of big risks in the study. But we are telling you about all the little ones that might happen. If you get a little bored, just let us know. We'll take a break because we need you to be actively involved in paying attention to the task. Right? You guys are all psychologists, so you guys know that for you to get good data, you need people to be paying attention, or the data that you're collecting is kind of worthless. So let them know that fatigue is a risk factor, but just let us know if you need a break. We actually have a little coffee machine behind the way. If they start to get a little drowsy and they would like a little coffee, we can give them a little something. Would you like some coffee? No, you good? Okay. We can do things like that. Now here's the other thing. We do that, we fill out the paperwork, they sign it, you sign it, we keep copies. Now we can actually start the experiment. It's a great time to remind them that this is a good time. No, it's a fantastic time to go to the bathroom. Because you can go to the bathroom later in the experiment if you really need to. It can happen. These things, we can make it happen. But it's a little cumbersome. But it's okay. But this is a great time to do it before we put all the electrodes in your hair and do all that kind of jazz. So again, good communication. Let them know, hey, this is cool. If you want some water, any of this kind of stuff, we can do those things. Usually sometimes they'll say yes, other times they say no. Remind them to turn their phone off.
I did.
You did? Okay. Remind yourself to turn your phone off. And everything I'm saying is on a checklist that Alana beautifully made together with Lindsay. And it even includes a checkbox that says, did you turn your phone off? Right? So, thank you, Alana. And then we commence. So you do all that stuff, we get everything going. So, as you can see, we've got all of our stuff here. These are our different drawers where our different equipment lives. We don't finish the experiment with these stuff up here. We put it all away in its proper places. Your sort of lead researcher in your sessions will kind of show you where that goes and how that works. But we'll have that kind of set up and ready to go. What else do we have orientation-wise? We've shown you guys that we have our testing chamber back here. We also have our two computers here. The one on the right is our stimuli delivery and presentation computer, and the one on the left there is our EEG recording computer. So what happens is we test people while we record these brainwaves in this room where they have a private little session, right, where they don't have like, you know, they're not getting tested on what they think about something with us like hanging over their shoulder. You're like, oh hey, you know, you want them to feel comfortable, this is just their thing. So we close the door, and that computer is presenting on the screen I should say, it is showing on the screen what that computer is presenting. The electrodes that are recording her brain activity are being fed through our power supply, through connection through the wall, and they get recorded on our left-hand side computer there. Okie doke. So those are kind of basic setup. And let's see here. I've been talking a lot. Do you guys have questions so far? Pretty good? Yes? Hit me. I did. Just because it was handy. Just because it was there. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it'll accomplish the job though. Except for when we plug the electrodes in, but we'll get to that later. Good points. So, no other questions, we'll just jump right in. So, the first thing we want to do is find out the right size cap. Measure her up. So you can actually throw that down there if you want. And what we'll do is, notice, by the way, these electrodes have started to creep. That will happen. Be conscientious. Which is why, I mean, you can do it like I did for a minute or two if you need to set up, but I've been having them here for way too long. It won't be like that in real life, but do be aware because you want to make sure you lean back if that's the case. Just some obvious stuff, but sometimes we forget that. You want to help me measure her up? Now we measure in centimeters, so we're just going to go around kind of the crown of her head.
This way?
Yeah. There you go. So what does that read? Well, yeah. 57? Okay, 57. Perfect. So, sir, you press that little button, it retracts. You want to look and find the cap that's 57. So they're on the back of these labels. Which one was that?
54.
54, okay, so no bueno. Here's a whole bunch of our caps. Now, we have a huge one for people with huge heads. I'm just going to take this off for now. And, you okay? So, there's huge caps in there. There's also, just for fun so you can see, there's also a little bit of baby hat. So when, this wasn't, you can do infant research with ERPs. This is one of the benefits of EEG, right? It's tough to get an infant to sit still in an MRI scanner, but it's a little easier. Well, it's never easy to get them to sit still, but it's a little easier to get them to sit still with EEG because at least they can sit on their mom or dad's lap. This is kind of cool when I have a little greyhound puppy named Juno, and so when she comes in and visits, we put this on her, and she promptly gets really mad at us and tries to pull it off and gives me these really sad eyes like, why on earth were you doing this to me?
I just came for a visit.
I'm sorry?
I just came for a visit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, what do we say was 54?
57.
57, okay. So we have 56 and 58. Let's do 58 because we don't want it too tight on her. It's a long time to have something cramping down on your head. Alrighty, so let's see here. The way that this will work is, first of all, the black goes in front. And GND stands for ground. So like a lot of electrical measurements, we always want a ground measure. Okay? And so we'll kind of work on it as a team to put that on. You can put that back down there. And we start from the front, and the way we'll put it in front and then pull it in the back. So if you want to do that, you can grab the front and I'll pull it in the back. And what we will look to do is kind of put this in the middle and line these up kind of over the eyes. Well, actually, why don't you, I'll tell you what. The way we usually do this is not laterally, but front and back. So if you stand in back of her.
Professor,
Yes,
you
sir.
have to move her hair
Yeah.
so you can get the...
Yeah, we will.
Oh,
So I'm going to show you guys kind of how we put it on first, then we're going to take it off, and then we'll kind of set her up a little bit better. So grab the back there, okay, and we just kind of start in front and then pull it down, yep, and around, okay. Now, see how that's kind of rotated and shifted?
Mhm.
All right, we're going to have to shift that back. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, as we set this up for real, is, you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. It just feels weird.
Yeah, it's going to feel a little weirder when we put the gel in. Okay? Hold that. So, as you put the cap on, you got to take your glasses off for just a minute.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll put them back on in just a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so we put those there. And then what we tend to do, especially with ladies with long hair, is we tend to ask them to put it in kind of a low ponytail. Okay? So do you have like a scrunchie or a thing? You got it? All right. Do you think you could indulge us with a low ponytail?
Sure, I guess.
Alright. And it doesn't have to be super tight either. Actually, a little loose is pretty good. Because we're going to end up using our syringe tip to kind of go through on the back of the head where all that hair is kind of like matted up. It creates kind of a layer. And we're going to have to kind of go through there and create a channel and it works perfectly nice. But if it's a little looser, it kind of helps. So that's wonderful. And in fact, what I might even do you mind if I lower it just a little bit?
Sure.
Okay. So that works out really well. So it ends up being kind of like you're a hairdresser for a couple hours. Okay. So let's try this again. And do that front side. Okie doke. There you go. Just pull it back nice and gentle. Feel a little bit better. Okay. So see how this is centered right here. So I'm going to ask you to move you over. All right. So can you kind of sit in the center of the chair? Good. And what you guys can do is, one, see that we've got these nice comfortable ear slots. Okay? And you can do it any way that they prefer, but you should know that just about everybody tends to report that it's more comfortable to have the ears coming out of the slots. So you want to make sure that they're set up like that, because they're not always going to talk with you. Sometimes they're still kind of intimidated. And then you let them know that we'll kind of Velcro this down, but that that's an example of how we can put it on, but you can readjust that.
Yeah, it's like
It's a little too tight?
Yeah.
Okay. So you kind of ask them to do that, because how do you really know, right? Okay. And you let them know this is going to be on for a while, so it should be comfortable and not too tight. And then sometimes they'll make it where it's kind of crisscross to the side, so you can kind of like bring it back. Okay? Now you want to also verify, you pull that back, and you kind of go from this spot in between the eyes to essentially down there, essentially the nape of the head. There you go. And you want this to be kind of in the middle. So what's that number at right about there?
15.
Okay, 15. That's perfect. So right about in the middle there. And then from the top of the ear to the other ear, where's that?
To the bottom ear?
Top of the ear.
Top of the ear. 12 and a half.
12 and a half. Okay, that's perfect. So right about 6 and a half, 6 and a quarter there. So this is our central electrode, and that should be kind of your middle point for those measurements. And if it's off, then you'll see that we just kind of readjust. Okay, so now that we have this here, we'll put some of the eye electrodes on. So what we'll do is I'm going to grab a little swab. And
Do you want to open it?
oh yeah. And you want to remember our story. You want to tell them, "Hey, I am about to do this." Okay. It might feel a little cold. It'll otherwise be okay. And you want to use those sights. So on your side, you're going to do it essentially. You can lift that up and put it essentially there. Now I rushed ahead and I just put the cap on because I wanted to save some time. But usually you would do this before you put the cap on. You would attach the electrodes here before you put the cap on. But we're just kind of like moving along.
Should you close your eyes first?
Oh, close their eyes first, of course, yeah.
I was thinking-
So, you do want to tell them, I'm going to sort of swab off your cheek, okay? So keep your eyes closed.
We're going to torture you now.
No, we're not going to torture you.
Open door.
Why can't they do it themselves?
Because they can't see.
But with their eyes open in a
They
mirror?
can't see where, well, we don't really have a
I
mirror
prefer
handy.
not to.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, you know where you're going to put the electrodes and they don't. And it's just a little bit easier. I mean, yeah. So I would do that. Once you get in there on that side.
I'm sure the way you just open it and then.
Yeah, just whatever.
Okay.
It's just rubbing alcohol.
Just gently. On the dye too?
No, and you'll know because you just want to put it in that spot.
Oh, okay, then just that. So.
Yep. So there's a little bit more on this side, but this one's just one. So, okay, and let's make sure your ear's back here. Right here. Can you put that back? Sure. Adjust that. Okay, so... Now remember we talked about those mastoid electrodes in class that are really important because we use them as a reference? Okay, these are going to be those two electrodes right behind the ear. So sometimes it's good, if you can reach there, to clean off those sites too. Just because that's going to define how good of your connection is. Because any other measurements on these sites are only going to be as clean as what we're referring to as a comparison. So you can kind of do that on the mastoid. So there's a little bone back there. So for you, it would be essentially there.
Okay.
So you want to do it on that. That's it. Where did that trash can go? Oh, you want to pass that? Can you pass that trash can? Thank you. All right. So this is a good point to note because we will have trash during this, and it's really helpful to have the can handy. All right, so we got that. Now is a good time we can actually put our glasses back. Well, can you hold these for a second? And we're going to put the eye electrodes on. And Alana, which colors are you guys using for the eyes?
We haven't really been using any specific.
Okay, cool. You want to help me with this, maybe? Okay, so let's just take a look. Are there questions? Huh? Anybody else want to come in and help? You get to wear a lab coat. There's more. We saw lots of ladies' lab coats in there.
Very spiffy too.
Yeah. Nobody? Anybody? Alana, you want to help?
She said, I don't need no lab coat.
She brought her own. Okay, so get these tangled up.
Yep. It's really important to do this part before you get to the point where you apply it, because this can take me up to 15 minutes to untangle.
Fun.
Yeah, that's fun. You thought headphones were bad.
Okay, so
Trying to get the ground out of
You
here.
guys ever thought of like using the binder clips?
what's that?
Using the binder clips
That
For what?
is a good idea.
to not
So
have
they
it
don't
tangled up.
That is a good idea. Maybe we will start doing that. Okay, so like I said, I kind of put these aside because we were jumping around between things, but like she said, we normally wouldn't do this. It wouldn't be necessary to unsort these, but I'm trying to do lots of things at once, which is why you shouldn't do that. Yeah.
Is that a mesh where the gel can get onto the hair?
Technically, yeah, it's just
Okay.
fabric, so it can definitely seep through, and that's a really good point. So there's something called a salt bridge that you want to avoid at all costs. So the gel is salt, right? And the whole reason we're using it is because it conducts electricity from point A to point B. So if you put too much gel in this spot and it leaks out beyond here, and you put too much gel in this spot and it leaks out beyond there, now they've bridged together, and this site now becomes one site because you can't differentiate the electrical signals, and you basically ruined your time. So we'll get to that when we start filling these in with gel. It's going to be something where we'll learn that just a little bit of gel, or there's a healthy medium, and you want to kind of hold the capsule down so that the gel doesn't leak out the sides. And so we'll work on the technique on getting that. So you want to grab one of these?
Yeah.
What you can do is you can ask them to hold this back end. You just hold it in your lap, it's fine, no real rush. And you want to put a sticker on it.
Okay. Are those inside?
Yeah. Can you pass a few stickers?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to recruit you.
Okay.
Do you want a lab coat?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hold that circle?
Okay.
And can you hold that end? Just a little bit of energy. Just line up the holes. Got it?
But try not to put the tab directly in line with the wire. So when you take it off, it's easier that you can not to pull the wire.
Okay.
And you got that one? Oh, you can do that. Do you want to hold this one? This one. Hold that.
What's your name?
Jesse. You hold that. And ask you to hold that.
So just try to line it up with the hole on the electrode.
A lot of talking
And
today.
just offset the tab a little so it doesn't line up with the wire.
Oh, does it matter what color? Or are they all the same color?
They're all the same.
And if you're good, you're lined up, you can put it basically there.
Do you want the gel in it?
Yeah, I guess not from today. Oh, we should show them how to do it right. Okay, so what you're going to do is, before you tape it on, you're going to take a little bit of gel and just literally dab a tiny little bit. Really not much is needed. That's it. Trash? Trash?
Not yet.
How you doing there, Stormy? Okay.
We're like,
Oh wait, there we go. I thought I put it backwards.
Okay, so you can follow this guy.
And then you take the sticker off from this side?
Yeah, but under the cap.
You already put it on there.
I was just gonna just leave it on.
Yep.
And
You want to line
on
that up
top of
perfectly
the
just there.
actual little, just put the sticker on top of, yeah, the gel.
You're gonna put one.
The electrode, you put the gel on top of the electrode and then the sticker on top of the
Would
gel.
it go on the cloth? On the, yeah, you can.
Under the cloth.
Oh, okay.
We just kind of rushed ahead. Yep.
Someone be above the eye.
Yep.
So we'll do right here.
Yep. Nice. Now the thing you want to keep in mind, and these ladies did this really well, is you want this and this to be basically vertically aligned in the center with their pupil. So that works. Nicely done. And now that we have that done, actually we should do, that's fine for now. I can help, can you hold that for a second? You can open your eyes, and now you can put their glasses back on. And so usually it works better. So first of all, these wires are going to come, can you let go of these for just a second? Okay. These are going to end up, and you do want to be careful because you don't want, sometimes they'll drop them like that on the floor. And you can kind of hold that in back there. Because these are ultimately going to come, this is going to come this way. Okay? And now we can kind of put that there. Does that feel okay? And you can adjust that if you need to. All right. Questions?
You're missing one.
Oh, you missed one. Okay. We want to put that one right in the middle. So take that sucker off, and you can look at this head if you need to.
Do you want to align it with the black thing on the
This one doesn't need to be so aligned. This is actually another ground electrode for the ocular sites.
So it doesn't go under the cap, right?
No, this goes right where it shows there on the floor.
Does the ground electrode need gel? Or did you guys put it in?
I think you put it in already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can feed that wire a little bit in the back here. And so we can kind of bring this back there. And one of the things you would do here is see how this is on her eye? Here, watch out. Can you step aside? So you see how this is hanging over her eye? What we would do is actually set up the sticker so that the wire itself feeds upwards. It's a really good example of kind of proper placement and stuff. Good job. And then what these do, let me back up just a little bit. These plug in to these connections here. And they're each labeled for the VEOG, which means vertical electrooculogram. So vertical means this one and this one. And there's a U and an L, so upper and lower. So you connect those as that. And there's another one for HEOG, horizontal electrooculogram. And so they're on little Velcro tabs, and we just kind of connect them. So I'll hold this if you want. And you can plug those in. Take it one at a time. Here.
Oh, here's one.
So let's say the green one is up, vertical ocular. Oh, are you the colorblind one? Oh goodness. My luck, right? Okay, sorry. Upper is green. Okay.
Lower's red.
Lower's red. Okay, thank you. And then black's in the middle.
Okay, I can see that.
Okay. Okay, and then we have, can I get this green one? Thank you, Stormy. Alrighty.
Where's the
Green is horizontal.
Right?
Yeah, just Velcro it down. And the blue? Okay. And then you want to Velcro those down. Now here's the thing. A couple of things to note that are really important, or very practical about this point. So now, she is now connected, which is why it's tough to go to the bathroom. I mean, she can go to the bathroom, it's just going to be a tough mess to clean up, right? But she's connected, and so you want to be mindful of that, because they tend to not do anything, which is perfect, right? They just hang out. We tend to screw it up, because we bump into her, or we bump into the wires and pull them out, and they either pull off of here or pull out of there. They're very delicate, very sensitive. You know, this is on us. We just want to be, you know, conscientious and all that kind of good jazz. So, with that said, we now start filling up these capsules with some gel. So, this is a good way to kind of explain it. The way that it's a good technique to use is a two-handed technique. So, one, if any of you guys have ever have not used medical syringes before, okay, this is the way to hold it. Use your thumb to press, and these two tabs to hold with your fingers. Don't do this. Okay? And use a two-handed technique to do this. So, one hand holds the capsule. Now, you don't want to jam it into her head because she'll react like that. She'll be like, ugh, right? You don't want to totally push her head away, but you do want to hold a little bit of pressure on it and hold it down to make sure the gel doesn't leak out the sides and create that salt bridge. Okay? So we're going to hold this there, and you're just basically going to fill up a little bit of gel. Now you want to talk to them, especially at first, and say, okay, so I'm about to do this. It's going to feel a little cold and goopy. Do you feel that?
How does it feel like?
I have no idea. It's weird. It's weird.
Okay, so you fill that up, and now notice, see how the gel is kind of like coming right up to the top there? It's a pretty good amount, and that's what you're going to do. You're just going to kind of move around. Now she's got some hair. Now if you put me down there, or you, you know, there's not going to be a lot of hair there to get in the way. It's going to be a little bit easier. But the hair itself doesn't actually present that much of an impediment to successful recording. People would be surprised to know that. We get fantastic recordings from ladies with wonderfully long hair. Now, what can get in the way, Alex, my man, I don't know, dude, the dreads, it might not happen, man. So if you guys have guys who have dreadlocks or some sort of a weird hairdo where there's a physical barrier that keeps the electrodes off the side of the scalp, that can be a problem. But the hair itself, you'd come in here and you could lift up the capsule just a little bit, and you kind of move the hair out of the way and create a little channel. Okay? See that little channel in there? Yeah. So you do that, and then you could kind of fill it up with that gel, and that's it. So what we want to do is first fill up all the gel. Okay? When all the gel's filled up, that first allows time for the gel to just seep in, kind of into the pores a little bit, and kind of get where we need it to be. And then, once it's filled up, then we'll go through, and in each site, yeah, you feel that, right? Can you feel that? Did it hurt?
No, it was too good.
Yeah, that means you're doing it about the right tension. You don't want it to hurt, and especially when you start, you say, okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the blunt end of the syringe, and I'm just going to kind of move it around a little bit. You should feel it on your scalp, but it shouldn't hurt. And it's important to ask them for feedback, because maybe you're too gentle. Maybe you're too scared to actually make contact. Which means you're not doing anything. So, have fun. You're not doing anything. Right? It's not going to connect the electrodes very well. You want them to say, you want to ask them, can you feel that? And if you want them to say, if they say no, you're like, okay, fine, I just know I need to go a little bit more. Can you feel that? Like, can you feel it actually on the skin? Okay. Does it hurt?
No.
Okay, if it starts to hurt, just let me know. I'm just going to work it in a little bit. Now, what's kind of funny is, usually, I told the story of one of my best buddies who did this and almost freaked out because he got a little alcohol swab on a cut in his face. Usually, the guys tend to be really sensitive to this. And they're like, oh, you know. And usually the girls are They're like, yeah, I go to the beauty salon all the time.
I know.
Pull my hair all the time. You know, and girls are used to, you know, people futzing around up there, and they're a little bit not as sensitive. So do be mindful of that, because sometimes the guys actually won't say anything, and you want them to let you know. As well as the girls too. So have some fun.
You guys need one more to go.
Yeah.
Do you feel each one?
What's that?
Nothing hasn't gotten in yet.
Oh, that's.
You wanna help?
Oh, yeah,
Open
those,
those
yeah.
suckers up?
No, okay.
Make sure you massage it around.
Okay. I don't think I'm qualified for that.
For what?
Just don't apply too much pressure, that's all.
It's not stabbing me, that's all I have.
Just minimal pressure, that's all.
Do you feel that?
So, where's the other two?
You should feel it.
Don't be scared.
Yeah, don't.
And, let's see.
I can get another one.
We're not.
You're laughing and making it difficult for him.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Fine. Do you feel it?
More pressure.
Part of our fault talking to you.
Fill that up a little bit.
Cool.
You have to
It's-
create like a little
Yeah, it's not.
pathway.
There's like no
Thank you.
pressure at all.
That's what I'm saying, you gotta have her feel it. For it.
Yeah, if you could.
Just go back and forth.
Can you connect that?
Okay.
And you guys want to fill that up for me? And then we can fill up this one. That one too?
How many syringes
Just
do
move
you
on if you
usually
doesn't feel
use
comfortable.
per participant?
One per researcher.
Okay.
So usually, ideally when we conduct data, we can usually do it with 2 people. For our class, we'll probably do between 4 and 5 per subject. And so we would never use more than 1 of these per person.
Yeah.
I mean, just
I
don't need
don't
it.
think it's
Okay.
going in.
It's too much job.
Good stuff.
Thank you, sir. So you get these little extra gel goops, so clean them off. And now, yeah. So the thing is you got to be mindful, because if I would have just put this down here, you start getting gel too close to this sucker. No good. So you know, it's one of those things.
Probably because there was 2 still.
Okay, so trade jet. You put those 2 guys together. Does that sound good? It's just a screw top. A switch.
I need to clean it up.
Okie dokie. Okay, so we got this one's ready, and this one's ready. If anybody who wants to help fill these with gel, okay.
We're like 3.
Very soon. You guys, if you guys want lab coats, we can pass those over. I think we have a use for some of them.
More people to poke at you.
There's one.
Just let you know.
Figure out the size of those.
I think we just need 3 total.
Anybody else? You guys want coats? Okay. You guys good? Okay.
Amazing.
So,
Behind the
yeah, let me just take a look.
I'll go in here.
So what ends up working, as you work as a team, right, is you each take a little quadrant of the scalp, which means it goes pretty quick because you each only do about 5 or 6 electrode sites. And so it works out pretty good. So 2 hands. If you can't reach, then don't do it.
Yeah, I
But
can't reach.
so you shouldn't be doing the front ones, you should be doing this quadrant. So this is why we typically don't have more than, let's say, 4 or 5 people per session, because you can see how crammed it gets.
How do you feel in the back?
I'm okay.
Do you feel it?
Barely.
Okay. Is this okay because it's in your forehead?
And so something that we'll talk about as we move forward a little bit is we'll end up later on checking what we call the impedance values,
So you feel
right?
it now?
When we turn the battery on and we connect this stuff.
I feel it.
Right now we're not able to do that because the electrodes themselves aren't actually connected in. So we're just kind of doing that abrasion at sort of a casual level that we're going to have to go in and do more of later. So you work it a little bit because it's easier access now, but we're going to come back to those in a little bit. Pleasure.
if you do get the bridge between the gels, what do? You just have to start over?
Yeah. So the answer to what happens if you get the bridge between the electrode sites is don't get the bridge between the electrode sites. So, you know, and not to be facetious or anything like that, but it's usually not a problem because we're usually conscientious enough to make sure it doesn't happen. But if I don't say that first, then people don't know.
Yeah.
And so then that's when it happens. But generally, yeah.
So you want the gel all the way to the top, or?
It doesn't have to be entirely too, because we're going to be filling that space with the electrode too.
Okay.
So that's not how you hold it.
Which one? This one?
Or, well, actually, no. I'm sorry. I thought you were injecting gel. I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm
That's fine.
scraping.
I'm all out. I need more ammo.
Okay. Who wants to reload?
No, man. That's really nice.
Are you enjoying the massage?
But I don't really like massages. But
I'm
I'm feeling
just
okay.
kidding.
It's fine.
As long as you don't feel anything.
Don't be scared. I'm not fragile.
I don't think they need my help anymore, so.
Yeah. Usually
They got it covered.
this is pretty good. Although they missed one spot here in the middle in the ground, but we'll get that later. And so with these back sights, you really got to kind of move that hair into kind of a channel with the ladies who have that kind of ponytail thing. But usually you can get it, and it's usually not too much of a problem.
Does this one hurt?
You want to get that
We
one,
still
that one.
With the ground one, do we still do the scraping motion? Even though
Yeah, just a little bit, but gentle, right? Because it has to be even more gentle because there's no hair there in between. It's literally, I mean, it's just doing that, like, sensitive. Yeah, so that's the other thing that hopefully these guys can relate to you is that it's easy to miss one or two. There's a lot in here, which is why I recommend going through in a systematic, having each person do a little quadrant. If you all just kind of go, oh, boop, 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 then you think somebody else got this one or I got that one. Yeah. Oop, oop, your syringe broke. So, nope. Yep. That didn't break, you just got to screw it in. There you go.
I apologize for my head.
No, you're good. Okay, so we got gel in all of them.
What if it comes off with the whole syringe?
Well, one thing you can do is kind of do this and kind of put it back in. You can kind of push that back in like that. So put that back in. And otherwise, you can kind of actually scoop it out and you can kind of hang it off. Keep going. So are we gelled up in all of them?
this one.
Okay, so what we can do next, now that the gel's done, we're going to actually start working with the actual electrodes. So, let me sneak around you guys. I'm going to have to sneak in there. Excuse me. So, remember, we're going to have our electrodes that are going to be hanging up here because we don't want them by the gel or anything like that. Alex, do you know how to set up the computer? Could you set up that set?
Sure.
Alright.
Excuse me, people.
Alex.
Hey, what's up? How you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
You look fabulous.
Alright, so let's just take a look here. Now we have all of our electrodes, right? Very, very sensitive, expensive, delicate. You're very careful with that. Of course, the most delicate parts are the back end and the middle end. So what we're going to do is there's a little connector back here, and if you guys want, you guys can kind of come back here and see a little bit how we put this in. You guys want to come over here and see how we plug this in? Okay, so there's some equipment back here you guys might want to come and see.
Oh, okay.
Okay, because I can't really take it out. But we're basically going to You're not going to do it. You're not going to move this like I'm moving it now. But this is the battery connector. It connects to that. That's going to turn our power on. And then what we're going to do is take our section, and this is very delicate, and you don't put it in sideways one way. You want to put it in the same way, and these two clips are going to click. And you're going to do it in this front. You're going to do it in this front side here. Okay. That. And it clicks in. Okay. Now, so I'm clipped in there. It should be able to be turned on.
500 millivolts?
Well, you probably have to restart it because
Oh, yeah.
I think it has, right? Doesn't it have to be plugged in first?
Wow, yeah.
The battery. So it's an important part to note. And the person who's in charge of the sessions will kind of cover the computers and stuff for you. Just
There we go.
so, that was it.
Oh, yeah, I thought they were already.
All right, so, okay, so,
Alex is here.
maybe in a minute. I was first going to ask if I can snag a drink from that metal cup, because I've been talking for a while. Thank you, sir.
So can the participants like have their eyes open during this time?
Oh no, I prefer to have my eyes closed.
Are you just kidding?
She just did. That's fine.
Okay, so
I'll
so,
come
yeah,
back
you,
later.
so you can bring the camera in a little closer if you want, just so you
you want to carry
see
it?
this.
Yeah.
So let me show you guys something that happened right off the bat. Look at how these lit up. They're all red now.
Oh, sorry.
Right? So they're all red. Now, in this case, red is bad in the sense that they're going to color code how good our impedance measures are. Okay? So red is like a stoplight. Red is bad. I mean, kind of. And yellow is kind of in the middle, and green is good. So, actually, Alex, probably it'd be helpful if you scoot a little bit out so they can see the computer screen. What will happen is these are essentially all the different electrode sites are those different red squares, and they all have those labels that we talked about: P3, P4, the International 1020 system that we'll revisit back in class. And on that color bar on the right-hand side is a scale where the colors correspond to kiloohms. That is the value electrically of our impedance. Now, high is high impedance. That's why it's red. That's a lot of interference. We want nice and low, essentially below about 15 kiloohms. Okay, that's kind of our benchmark. So we'll start to plug these electrodes in one by one, and as we do that, we'll see that they'll correspond to how good the different connections are, and a lot of them won't be very good. And so what we'll do is we'll take those syringe tips, and we'll put them through this tiny little hole in there while this is in there, and we'll again work those sites very gently, very slowly, but methodically. People will each work a little section, and you'll see as you stay on the same electrode and keep kind of circling and scraping very gently, those colors are going to start to change. Now, we do not start the study until all of them are green. Some people, it happens very quickly. Other people, it takes a little bit more time. So sometimes 2 hours. That's why we wouldn't even start with Alex as a subject, because his dreads would get in the way. So, okay. Anyways, one last thing to note is that every one of these electrodes has a little tag on it. And those tags are numbers. So this one says 22, 25, 26, 16, 18. And those numbers tell you where to plug it in. So you're going to match up number 30 with number 30 here. So basically don't mess up. You know, it's not hard to do wrong, but it's also not hard to do right. So you know, and they're lateralized and they come in, you know, these different little bundles. So okay, who wants to help out on this side?
Go ahead, Alex, you're the closest.
Alex,
Why don't you
you better not
delegate
kill me.
one of those bundles to somebody? We're gonna need other people here, guys. So you want to get that side?
Yeah,
I won't bite.
Somebody here. Now, notice that we have a little clip back here. Now, this box, the splitter box, gets a little heavy, and so we want to. Generally, we can kind of clip it onto, you know, if they have a hood or something like that. Actually, you know what? These need to reverse to the other side. There you go. Sorry about that. Let me just clip this onto the hood. Okay. There we go. And I'll help with some of these.
Okay.
There we go. It's just.
Okay. Is there certain alignments or
Just number.
Well, the alignment is just numbers to number. It's got to be the right number. 26, 26. And generally, good question actually on alignment. So it's not going to affect the data, but it's helpful if you align it so that the wire comes back towards me, towards the back essentially.
and then it just
And so here's another little tip and trick, right?
or no?
Yeah, so that'll fall off sometimes. Make sure that's clipped down there. Not yet. You gotta put this back on. So one way to do this is, again, use a two-hand approach. Just like when we filled the gel, use one hand. I'm right-handed, so I use my right hand. So use your left hand to hold the plastic capsule in place. If you guys can't see, you can kind of rotate through and see what we're doing.
There's no gel in it.
And the right hand to actually then plug it in.
Put gel in there a little bit. Don't worry too much about that.
There's room over here if you guys want to come in.
And you guys want to plug a few in? You
Okay.
guys want to rotate in? You can grab some of these.
Here, I'll let you start.
Somebody, you want to do these? And somebody else can do those. Somebody else want to come in? We got a couple extras.
I already. Anyone else?
Watch the wires, nobody tripping over them.
Yeah.
Do any of you guys want to try?
Is it like this?
Online.
Put these in some?
Nah, I've already been poked by EMG.
Like I'm doing it.
When I had a pinched nerve in my right hand, they wanted to sit there and poke me all over my right hand.
Yeah.
So notice how so far they're all staying red, right?
Mhm.
Because we're not working any of them yet.
Sometimes someone will go green
Good
really
job.
Addante, the EMGs is usually single, right?
Oftentimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're depressed, it'll be fine.
Okay. You know what's good to do too? Here, I'll do it in a little bit.
Put them all in a certain direction.
Yeah, so you can like face them to the back because she's
Gotcha.
gonna be facing that way.
Mhm.
Yeah, that kind of idea.
Sure.
Okay, so are they all plugged in?
Almost. You're all red too.
Supposed to.
So you don't want to pull it out. You want to push it in. So you are pulling the plastic piece off the head.
Okay.
You don't want to do that. You want the plastic piece on the head because you just put all that gel there. You don't want to pull all that off.
Mhm.
Okay, so
I'm fucking out of it. There's lab coats right there, and there's 2 towels over there, bro.
okay, so we're gonna need these syringes. Okay, so some people who haven't been up here yet. Let's rotate through. I need some people to grab some of these syringes.
It's the tedious part.
Back there. You guys wanna?
I don't bite.
You guys are gonna have to do this for data collection sessions anyway, so we might as well learn. Grab one of those. Somebody else?
Hi, Phil.
Lana, you wanna help?
Oh, just with the ground electrode.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'll move out of the way. Hopefully else can do it.
Anyone want to plug in the ground electrode? And then put the wire like sticking out this way so you can see. Oh, here, I'll hold this side for you.
Oh yeah, I got some yellows.
Hey. Oh, green.
That's because of the
All right. So, let's see here. So, if you guys can take a look, I want you to see this computer screen, and you can see we already have those colors changing, right? Our impedances are looking different. Some are really good connected, others are not. So you can imagine maybe some of the ones that are really good are some of these frontal ones where there's really no hair in between. It's really just a direct connection on the scalp. And we first, right, we filled it up with gel, we let it soak in, we also worked each of them in a little bit. So we already got some of them attached. But then there's going to be some other ones that are yellow and red. So you can see them, they're the same colors that these are colors on the sites here. Okay? So what you want to do is you're going to find out which one. So in this case, it's electrode 30. So which one is 30 is F2. So that's going to be this one. So I can find out, where's F2 on there?
Alright.
Show me the box.
Alright.
Okay, so see that bottom right red box? That's what I'm going to be working right here. Now when I work this electrode to try to get the impedance down, again, it's kind of a two-handed technique. So since I'm right-handed, I like to use my other hand, my left one, to kind of hold it in place, right? Because you want to keep that gel down towards the scalp. And then you're going to fit the syringe in through that little hole, and you're going to start moving it. Now you're not going to have the space to really move or rotate around a lot the way that we did when we didn't have the electrodes in there, okay? But you can still do it and move it around. So, oh, see how I just turned green?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you feel that? Does it hurt?
No.
Okay. And then you let it go, and then every now and then it'll go back to yellow or red, and you go back, and then you go back and back. You play this little game of tag. But if you're lucky, it just stays that way. And so, why don't you grab some of these over here?
But you can't play tag with ground, right?
You don't need to. Well, kind of. Yeah, you can do that a little bit. The ground basically stays red.
Oh, okay.
It'll turn green.
It's changing a whole bunch of those with you playing with the ground.
Okay, so why don't you guys come in and do some of these red ones? Talk with her.
Let me know when I hurt you.
No, you don't say that. This is, you don't say that.
Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure you couldn't hurt me.
No, but you know, remember, this is a professional scientific research environment.
If you
And
feel
that's-
any pain, let me know, please. I'll stop.
Yeah. So you first want to ask, can you feel it at all? Because you want to make sure that you are actually making contact with the scalp.
Can you feel
Right?
that? I'm all like,
Now then, once you know that they can feel it, now that's already green. Yeah.